Hi everybody, my name is Vince Arnasia. Welcome to the 5.9 demo series. Today's episode will be around the focus of Cloud Manager 4.0 and how it compares to SCVMM. Joining me today is Rob Conley as usual. Rob is our senior systems engineer who works quite a bit with our customers on the pre-sale side and also helps with some of the product requirements we need to help build our product. A little bit about 5.9 before we get into the specific features for Cloud Manager 4.0. For those of you unfamiliar with 5.9, 5.9 is a software vendor that has focused on Microsoft cloud infrastructure for the past 7 years or so. Initially with a core focus towards Hyper-V, and then of course expanding the platform to now cover Azure as well, both for management and security within the cloud infrastructure space. Over those 7 years, we've accrued over 1,000 active global customers, spanning the globe across a variety of verticals, encompassing customers that are sort of SMB, mid-market, large-scale enterprise customers, and managed service providers as well, with a recent set of additions to cloud service providers also that are looking to serve Azure to their customer base. Of course, given the nature of our Microsoft support, we have a deep relationship with Microsoft, both on the partner front and working directly with their engineering and program management teams to build out the features and the platform coverage that benefits you as our customer. The company's mission is pretty straightforward. It's to help simplify, optimize, and secure your Microsoft hybrid cloud infrastructure. As it relates to the 5.9 platform, when you think of 5.9, you probably think of a product that's focused around Hyper-V management. And really over the years, we've expanded that out extensively. You can see here that our core coverage not only spans Hyper-V, but also Azure. As of last year, we're working on Azure Stack in the up few months that we'll be adding. We also have coverage for cloud migration consisting of a variety of private cloud infrastructures going over to public cloud infrastructure. That's a separate product as it relates to cloud migration. The flagship product, of course, is Cloud Manager, which allows for customers to manage their private public cloud infrastructure. We provide replication for both on-prem and Azure as well, monitoring, which comprises of dashboards and reporting and things that benefit a systems administrator on a day-to-day basis. The ability to optimize your environment, backup is integrated as well, in addition to disaster recovery. And then, of course, administration, the ability to provide granular role-based access control, allowing for multi-tenant environments for the service providers and other larger enterprises is paramount to the success of the platform. And then lastly, the cloud security product is really a set of integrated best-of-breed capabilities comprising of intrusion detection, antivirus, anomaly detection, a lot of different capabilities and more that we're adding on a release-to-release basis. So this is the entire platform. Today's focus will be on Cloud Manager, the specific features of the newer version that we'll be releasing in the next 2 to 3 weeks. How does Cloud Manager compare to SCVMM? This is a question that we obviously get a lot from a sales perspective. How does it really compare to System Center when you look at System Center as a whole? And so this is a simplified look at the Microsoft System Center suite and how the 5.9 Cloud Manager modules sort of line up to that. You'll get a chance to look at these here in the very near future when Rob takes over the demo. But you can see with endpoint protection, data protection manager, DPM as they call it, operations manager, and virtual machine manager, those are distinct products. They're obviously part of System Center, but they're separate products that lead to a lot of overhead, as we've seen with customers that are looking to move off of some of those SCVMM challenges and system center challenges as a whole. The goal of Five9, the platform, is to provide operational and cost efficiencies to customers, which we do that by providing all these capabilities within a single pane of glass. Very lightweight console. You can run from a variety of Windows environments, really any location. The depth of the platform really stands out when you evaluate it or when you end up buying it. The depth is there, which normally you wouldn't get with a platform that is this wide in its coverage, especially through a single pane of glass. But that's something that Five9 has really emphasized over the years, and we continue to do that to serve the system administrator needs. Last year, we added comprehensive Azure management support and also SDN management support. Once again, all available within the same Five9 Cloud Manager product. And of course, the flexible role-based access control is critical for customers, and we'll show you that here in a little bit. So with that, we're going to switch it over to Rob. Rob's going to walk you through a demo of these capabilities, and then we'll come back and talk through some of the challenges that customers are seeing based on discussions with them with SCVMM specifically, and then we'll of course take your questions. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Vince, and thanks for everyone for joining us today. As Vince said, I'm going to run you through the Five9 Cloud Management Platform, and where I like to always start off typically is on the actual deployment and how it looks inside of your center and how you may actually deploy the software. And throughout today, we'll give some kind of comparisons exactly where we kind of align with System Center in some places. But first off, what you're looking at here is the actual client, and that's on the left side. So this is a .NET application that you would install in any location. Our software comes with unlimited users, unlimited installs of this client. So you would typically distribute this, maybe if you have a DevOps department, they would install this console on their desktop, your Hyper-V administrators. And even if you had particular users that only maybe needed a read-only or a monitoring level view, they could also. As you see, the console itself speaks to the cloud management server over a single port, 16080. So you can also offer this console access outside of your environment. So some clients are actually using this console, which has an encrypted connection, to gain access to their internal hypervisors externally using this console also. An example would be you install it on your laptop. You're at a Starbucks, for example. You would open up your laptop, connect. You would connect directly into your Five9 Cloud Manager server and see all of your infrastructure without having to set up an RDP connection down here first, using it as a jump box, as we typically did in the past. Some of the other things I'm going to show you today too is with this thick console in the 4.0 release, which is coming very shortly, I'm going to show you the first web-based access that we are introducing, which is going to be the Web Tenant Portal. So this is the HTML5 interface that allows you to provide access to your virtual machines or a subset of virtual machines and resources to an end user, so they can log into the interface and use any of these modules on their virtual machines. To start though, we're going to have basic access for the tenants, and I'll show you that. So as we saw, it speaks at 16080 is going to come into the Cloud Manager server. So this is very simple. If you look at this compared to maybe like a System Center deployment. System Center deployment, you might deploy your Data Protection Manager server with its SQL database. You would install, you can configure and install System Center Virtual Machine Manager, which also has its own database, SCOM, and all the other pieces, orchestration. All these are different services, potentially different VMs running in your environment. The difference is that we take all that and put it on a single management server. And what this server is the virtual machine running in your environment. It can also be a virtual machine potentially hosted in Azure if you wanted to, or you can install it on a dedicated piece of hardware. So that's what the console speaks to, is that centralized management server, and that management server speaks to all your Hyper-V hosts and your Azure subscriptions, and includes a single SQL database. So it's very easy to manage. A lot of times, as Vince said, I work with customers all day, and a lot of times I hear that administrators find themselves managing System Center more than they're managing the actual underlying infrastructure. And so if you find yourself in that bind, in some cases, if you're a big enterprise and you have the staff and the ability to maintain and manage a big enterprise deployment of System Center, it's easy. But if you are, a relatively smaller operation or smaller business, that could become a task in itself. So that's why Five9 Cloud Manager is very simple to deploy. You just deploy this management server and you're ready to go. So first thing I'm going to do today is I'm just going to run you through the current GA version so I can show you what the software looks like today if you downloaded it. And then what I'll do is I'm going to run into show you some of the new interfaces along with some of the new features of Fortnite. So I'm going to jump over to the interface here. One second. There we go. So what you're looking at now is that console application. So this is the console. I installed it on my desktop here, and I logged in. So when I log in, what you'll see on the left is I have a cluster. Inside that cluster, I have 2 Hyper-V hosts, and I also added another site. So this site is actually a remote site I use as my DR. And this is just a Hyper-V host sitting in a co-location center on a work group. It's not even connected to my existing domain. And I use this to either copy backups to it in some cases or do direct replications. So we do work with replication also, and I'll show you how that works in a second. But if I right-click, you can see some of the options that we perform. So obviously these options up here are kind of your basic options that you would get out of System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Obviously I can start the virtual machine. I can connect to the console of it. I can make any changes to the settings like the memory or the disk. And then we get into some other orchestration type scenarios where we're creating templates. And so what this gives you the ability to do is to take any virtual machine in your environment, you can simply create a template for that virtual machine. It syspreps the virtual machine, prepares it, and then anytime needed, when you want to go and deploy that virtual machine during a create VM process, you would go ahead and very easily just select that virtual machine, and it would deploy a copy of that virtual machine. During the deployment process, you can obviously make adjustments to the answer file in a wizard that we give. So, for example, you can change the username and password when it's deployed, what work group or domain it connects to, and even some of the network settings in some cases. So that gives you that ops manager types of orchestration where you can easily deploy from templates. We have fully clustered aware too. So in the single interface here, I can manage both non-clustered virtual machines and clustered virtual machines. So for example, if I add this machine to the cluster here, you'll see that it will go and change colors to a reddish color. And that means it's a cluster aware resource. Once it's a cluster aware resource, I can do things like live migrate that virtual machine very easily. I can move it to another node or another host in my environment. And obviously you're in a failover cluster, or if you have shared storage, you can do it while the machine is running, which is a huge benefit. So that's some more of the, I guess, the parity situation where you're looking at some of the management features, and what you're looking at is pretty much what we've added is what administrators are using, what we found on a daily basis. So from the single tool, kind of like what DPM might give you, we include the backup and we include replication. So you can very easily make sure your environment is replicated, backed up, and secured. This has been a very big topic as I speak with clients every day. More and more are getting into replication, or actually more concerned about replication or disaster recovery. And so what I'll do is I just want to illustrate how exactly we perform some of these and how it works in the environment. So I just see I have this one virtual machine. If I wanted to replicate this virtual machine down to DR host, I would right click on DR host, go to host settings. And you'll see that we're able to manage the actual host itself. We can make adjustments to your Hyper-V hosts remotely. So here I'm going to replication. And I've already done this before the call, but I would check this box. And in my case, I'm using HTTP. I would check that box. Now that I've done that, this machine is ready for replication. So all you do, it's very simple. You just click the machine, you right click, say replicate. And so the first thing that our software does, it goes through the environment and determines what Hyper-V host would be suitable for replication. In my case, it's DR host. And this is using native replication under the covers. So it's using default native Hyper-V replication. It's not something on top of your existing environment. So if you're already replicating today, our software would support those existing replicas. So they would just show up in the list here. So next option you get is how to transfer my replicas. So I'm just going to transfer them over HTTP. I want to replicate all the virtual disks. A little trick here, in some cases I've seen clients where they check this and they have two disks in their virtual machines. One disk is for the actual operating system and another disk is actually for swap. And I've seen situations where clients will not actually replicate the swap disk, but only replicate the OS disk. Reason why you might want to consider this, if it's an option for you, is that obviously your swap is where most of your changes are taking place. So the way replication works, and I'll show you here, is we actually sync changes. So if you're syncing your swap, those changes are very frequent and you'll consistently replicate that swap to your replication host. And obviously every time a system boots, swap is erased, so you really don't need those changes. Something to consider if it's available for you. It's a neat little trick. Helps speed up your replications, lower the amount of bits that are being sent over the wire. So here's the frequency at which we change. So basically what I'm saying here is every 5 minutes, we're going to send changes down to the corresponding machine. Latest recovery points. So this is great. If I click this and I say 24 here, for example, if Nano server, let's say, gets encrypted, and I just maintain the latest recovery point, when I fail over into the remote site, it's going to be encrypted. There's no difference because it just sent the last blocks over the last 5 minutes. So what this gives me ability to do is obviously restore back in time and give me the ability to say, okay, I want to restore this virtual machine from an hour ago. And then this is the synchronization schedule. So manual means you're going to have to right click and say, I want to sync the changes. Automatic, it's going to abide by this up here. And automatic during the following hours means it's only going to run during these hours. I'll just do automatic for now. Where do we want to send it? We'll send it over the network. We'll start it immediately. Push finish. So I just wanted to show this just in case you're not familiar with replication, which, as I said, it's a hot topic. And so what this does, it takes the virtual machine and makes the initial copy over the network, over that port 80, to the hypervisor at the corresponding site. And then that hypervisor basically just takes that virtual machine and keeps it on the hypervisor in the off state, waiting for you to actually command it to fail over. And once you do that, the virtual machine will become live in this remote site, and it's off in the opposite site. So that's how replication works. In a minute or two, we should see that VM pop up here if everything went correctly. I'm going to go back and check on it in the meantime. So this type of replication here gives you that on-prem type replication. But let's say you don't have a DR site available. Let's say you're also interested in maybe leveraging Azure. You already have Azure in your environment. You might have subscriptions already. So this is the on-prem. When we click Azure, you're looking at the hybrid scenario. So now we're looking at any Azure subscription that you've added. And so here, what I can do is I can easily take a look at all my virtual machines in the subscription and make some changes to it, like start, connect. If I click on any of the VMs, I can actually monitor their performance and get alerts or any type of data if there's a problem with these virtual machines through the alerts. But back to the replication topic itself, what we see is that if clients do not have the ability, and there's the Nano server coming in the remote site, to use this remote site, or maybe you want to use a mix of both. You can also use replication management in Azure. So what this does, it gives you the ability to take a server like that Nano server you see there, and replicate it up to Azure. So now this virtual machine is available in Azure with the same type of functionality that I have on-prem here. So a similar failover would look like this. Let's say I know that node 2 is going offline. This whole site needs to go offline for power maintenance, let's say. So I would turn off this virtual machine completely. Once that virtual machine is turned off, I can go ahead and do a failover. This is called a planned failover. So in some cases, an unplanned failover would mean that the site went offline without you knowing. A planned failover means that you've orchestrated the actual failover, basically. So here I'm going to reverse the direction and start the replica. So what happens here is the last changes of the nano server sitting on node 2 here are now sent down to this nano server, and now this nano server goes live. It's running in this remote site. It's failed over. And so the software takes care of that entire process for you, and you'll see this nano server eventually go live in this remote site. It's currently merging any last minute changes. So the same scenario works in Azure. So I can take that virtual machine while it's running on-prem, it's copying the blocks to this virtual machine that's sitting in cold storage in Azure. And when I need to, I can easily fail over this virtual machine the same way I did on-premise, but instead that virtual machine is now running in Azure. And when ready, I can obviously reverse the replication back and go back on-prem. So it's very simple. You would just select this right here. You would see a list of your on-premise virtual machines and your different Azure settings. And you can then specify the machines to replicate. And on the Azure side, we also support importing virtual machines. So if you wanted to import or migrate, you can easily migrate your on-premise virtual machines also to Azure. Keep in mind, this is going to be a one-time copy where the replication is continually updating that virtual machine sitting in Azure. And now you can see the virtual machine is running down here. I can right-click on this virtual machine itself, go to Replication tab. I get some other options. I can remove it. I can pause it. I can fail back to my original site. So that's kind of how both the Azure and the Hyper-V management work together. They provide similar type of scenarios where you can import or move virtual machines, replicate virtual machines. Some other places I just want to kind of jump to is backup. So this is what you would get typically through DPM, Data Protection Manager. Ours works very similar. Our software does have some differences though. So one difference with our software is we use native disk locations. So with DPM, you need to dedicate disks to the actual backup software. With us, what we're doing is we're actually using NTFS volumes, or we're using NAS devices to store the backups. Or it could be a Windows share. And the other place we're storing backups is actually in Azure. So I'll run through how a backup actually is commanded real quick, just so you can see some of the options that are supported. So, and why that's important is that if you want to actually look at your backup sets, I'm referring to the native volumes. If you want to look at your backup sets, when you're looking at our backup sets, you're going to be looking at files sitting on an actual file folder if you open them up. That's the little difference where it's not sitting on dedicated disks. So here I can use encryption, and I'll give an encryption key of test, for example, and I'll use compression. Keep in mind your encryption keys, they are not stored in our software, and they're required if you set them to restore the machine. It's great to stop someone from running out the data center with your backup, for example. So here's the machine I selected. If I wanted to, I could select all my machines or a subset. In this case, I'm only going to select the DC. I then select where I want to back up the virtual machine. In my case, I'm just using an SMB3 share. It's basically just a Windows share that I created on one of my hardware servers. Then I specify if I want to copy it to Azure. And here I put in my Azure key and my account name. So this actually puts it in blob storage, which is great. It's very inexpensive storage. So you can keep a copy of that virtual machine off premise. It's great mix also if you're doing the backups or the replications like I showed you earlier to include this type of backup. It's going to handle your disaster recovery and your business continuity scenarios. So we'll go ahead and make a backup to Azure. This is the setting. So if you want to do a manual backup, I can do a backup every hour. Most customers probably do a backup every day. Next option would be if I do a full or incremental backup every day. Obviously, you don't want to do a full backup, so I'll do incremental, and we'll do 30. So I'll just create a full archive every 30 backups. And so we're going to use incremental. We use block tracking. So it's this is a piece of our own technology that we're using to track the blocks that have changed since the last backup. That's how we handle incremental. So here's this really important part. I have to go all the way to the end to show what I consider to be one of the most important parts of our backup solution is that we give you the ability to store the backups on-prem and or store the backups in Azure, and then have separate retention periods for each. Very important for disaster recovery. So on-prem, I can keep my backups right next to my hypervisor. So if I need to restore, very quick, very easy, same network. But if I lost my building to a tornado, let's say, I can still restore my hypervisors from Azure. So it's almost like DR for your backups if you look at it that way. That's how the backup provider works. So we back up the virtual machines. You see your jobs here. You can very easily restore your backups. You'll see them in the archive section. And when you restore backups, you can either restore them to the original virtual machine, overwriting it, or maybe you just want to restore one file out of the virtual machine's disk. You can do that. So let's say a customer or an employee calls you and says, I need a Word document from last week. You can browse and download that file off of the disk. So that's something similar to the DPM. SDN management. Spend a little bit of time here. This is unique also to our software. It gives you the ability to easily deploy network controllers using a wizard. And then you can also deploy other things like software load balancers. You can deploy software muxes and all different types of SDN components using a very simple wizard. And once you deploy your SDN, you're able to then set up your logical networks, your virtual networks, and have full management from a single pane of SDN. So depending on which version of System Center you're running, you might be on SDN version 1, which is the older SDN. Our software supports SDN v2, which is the new implementation of SDN, and it's the current standard for SDN. And the last piece I just want to get into our current version is the administration part. And so in the current version, administration is really big. So this is some place where System Center has made some additional improvements in System Center 2019. But the way we do it is much more granular. And I just wanted to give you a quick demonstration of how exactly you would use RBAC access. And so we have users, tenants, and roles. So if I wanted to create a user that has access, let's say, to 2 or 3 Hyper-V hosts in my environment, and I can do that. So in order to do that, first I need to create a role. So what a role is, it limits the user's actions. And you can place multiple users in roles, or you can place just one user in a role. In this case, I will call it a Contoso Dev Team. So everything I check here is what somebody in the Contoso Dev Team will be able to do if I give them access to each one of these resources. So real quickly here, I just want to give them access at this time to virtual machines. I'm going to give them access to, let's just say, shutdown, save, restart, read, start. It's a couple simple actions here on the virtual machines, and obviously connect to the console. Push finish. We'll run through this more because we've made some adjustments in this in version 4, which I'll show you. And so then I go over to user accounts, and I'm just going to create a very simple example here. We have more advanced examples using Active Directory and using Active Directory groups. I'm just going to create a custom user, which is a very simple generic user that is stored in our databases. So I'll just create a user called Joe, give him password test. Next thing I do is I'm going to select what objects I want to give Joe access to in my environment. So here's clusters and hosts and all different stuff. So I just want to give him access to virtual machines. I can give him access to this SQL server on node 1 and this Nano server on node 2. And I'll give him Contoso Dev Team access. So that's how you do it. Push finish. And the reason why this is important also is the same type of scenario works for our new web interface, which I'll show you in a minute too. But this is how it would work with the actual console itself. So let's say you went out and either Joe is an external user or he's a local user to your environment. You would provide the credentials, and they would receive the software. They can then collect custom user, log in as Joe, password test. And then they'll see the infrastructure that you obviously appointed him, and then he'll be limited by the actions that are defined in the roles. And that's how we handle role-based access. It's very granular, so you can create custom clouds for a client. So you give them access to a server, you give them access to a storage location, you give them access to a library location to store his files or his other assets like templates and ISOs. And in that case, that user can log in and he has full control over a Hyper-V host and the virtual machine, but not over the entire environment. So once this loads here, I'll let you take a look at Joe real quick in the settings, and then we'll jump in and show you some of the new features that we're looking at in 4.0. And I apologize, while we wait here, I am using a virtual lab. The virtual lab can get a little slow at times when you have multiple windows open, but it is great. It's available on our website. So if you log into 59.com and go to the resources section on the top, you can very easily access this lab and use this software. It is very easy to install on premise, and we even have assisted installs. So if you did contact our sales team and you were interested in deploying this, they could set you up with me or another engineer on our team, and we would walk through the deployment process. But it's very easy. It typically takes about 15 minutes and requires no changes. So here you'll see that Joe is logged in. I can tell down here. I can see the 2 VMs. I have limited access to them. If I right click, you'll see I can only perform those limited actions. I can still have the visibility, so I can monitor these VMs. I can get reports on them. I can view the backups. But that's about it. I wouldn't be able to create any backups or any monitoring tasks. So next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to just kind of point out also the jobs view in the current version. The jobs view keeps track of what every user is doing in real time. But this has changed in 4.0. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to another console. I want to start introducing you to the newer version of this console, and I'll point out some of the additional benefits that we've included. 1 second. All right. So what you're looking at now is the newest version of our console. This is not GA yet. It should be coming shortly. I just want to kind of give you a sneak peek at some of the things that we're doing here and some of the changes that we've made. So first off, you'll see that the basic design is the same for this layout. We do have similar actions here. Not much has actually changed. But what we have done is we've improved performance. For example, when you right click and say host settings, for example, we've improved the performance of how quick some of the wizards in our software have loaded. But you'll notice that the jobs view has also changed. So now when I perform a job, like this VM workload here, if I turn it off, yep, I want to turn it off. You'll see down here that it tells me in the status bar what jobs are running, the percentage, but I can also now pull the bar up below and I get access to the infrastructure and what's currently running, which users are running these processes. All this data can go out syslog. So if you have something like Splunk, you can monitor all the events that are happening in your environment in real time. You can drill through this, go back particular dates. It's like a complete audit log of the entire environment. So we made the jobs tab much easier to access now. And if you just want to minimize this, you can always get real-time information down here of the jobs that are running. And down here also, green means it's running and completed. Blue means it's currently running. Red means it's failed. So it's a quick, easy way to identify your test statuses. Another place that we've made a big advancement, and it's great for our MSPs or again administrators that have potentially a commingled environment. So example of that might be is that you have these virtual machines that are sitting in your enterprise Azure account. But let's say you wanted to give access to just this virtual machine. We now can give you that ability. So you can create a user now that has the example of the access to these two virtual machines when they log in, but they also have access to the Azure Management tab. And when they log in, they can only see this virtual machine. And you'll see that adjustment here in the Administration tab in Categories. No, not Categories, apologize, in Roles. You'll see now when I create a role, I'll call this test 1, 2, 3. You'll see we have Azure subscriptions now and Azure virtual machines. So now we're able to limit RBAC, what they're able to do to the Azure subscription or the Azure virtual machines when they load our console or if they have access. So for example, they can connect to the virtual machines, delete them, and such. And then when you create a user, we've obviously added that as a resource that you can then select. So you'll notice that when I go through the create user process now, I can very easily select which Azure virtual machines to give them access to. This is also big for our CSP, our cloud service providers, where they want to manage the infrastructure for their clients. Maybe they want to put them all under a single subscription, but then just divvy out the access to them. So in this case, user does not need to log into the Azure portal. All they need is our software. You would select which virtual machines this user in Azure would have access to. And then you would select the level of access they would get, maybe only read only. And then if I wanted to, I can also give this user access to a virtual machine on premise at the same time. In that case, I'll give them basic access to those. Or if I wanted to, as I said, I can even give them access to a host, maybe like a full private cloud. Now they have the ability to create virtual machines themselves. So it's the granularity and also the addition of the Azure, which is new to the version. If we come back to the home, some of the additional areas that we've done too in the notifications area, we have event alerts. So you're going to receive these by email. So for example, if your VM failed to load the configurations, or if a merge failed, if a VM is running out of disk space, you'll receive alerts for these if they're firing in your hypervisors along with your clusters. You also receive alerts for any type of host or VM issue. So this is if your guest VM CPU runs over 60%, you're receiving a warning alert or critical. And we also monitor the clusters. So anything that's going on with your cluster, we usually monitor them. And we monitor your backups and replications. And we can actually schedule some reports. And I'll show you those reports in a second. And these reports and everything can come out email. And also syslog. So that's another version for 4.0, is that what we're doing now is in the past, we're able to send out these alerts through syslog, the actual events that happen. So every time someone turns off a machine, you'll get a record in your syslog system. But now anytime an alert happens in monitoring, these alerts, we can also send those out to syslog too. And that's a new feature of 4.0 also. And that's what you see here. These are alerts. I've selected my demo cluster here, and I'm getting the health of my demo cluster, any disks, any alerts that are coming up, and the jobs that have been performed. And so what I'll do here is if I go to disk, for example, in the blue area on top, you can monitor your CSV volumes, which is really big. In order to do this in System Center, you would need something probably like an Ops Manager in order to get visibility into this. It doesn't come from System Center itself. Our System Center Virtual Machine Manager, I should correct myself. But here they have different features that they can look at. So if I want to look at the IOPS over the past hour of my cluster disks or the past day, let's say I wanted to look at redirections. Redirects are bad, so good, I don't have any redirects. I can also look at the free space, how free space is going over a certain amount of time. So in that case, very easy access. If I wanted to, I can then drill down into each individual virtual machine. So here I'm drilling down into this demo node 2, real time. I can drill into the different aspects. Let's say I want to look at the CPU of demo node 2. I'll click here, show me the CPUs. And same with the virtual machines. If I click on a virtual machine, I also get the real-time data for that virtual machine. So in this case, this VM workload, I'm looking at the hypervisor CPU usage. This is what the guest CPU is doing. So this machine right now, if I open up Task Manager, is running at 96%. So it's definitely doing something. When did this start? That's what I might ask myself. Looks like it started earlier today, around 8 or 9 in the morning. So it gives you that quick visibility, drill in to find out what's going on with the machine. Another area that you would need Ops Manager is the VM lifecycle management, or this is not even included in some cases, or you have to create custom reports to do this. In our software, it's fully included. So what you're looking at here is the virtual machines over the past month. This area up here is the period of time that we're generating this data. What this tells me is over the past month, VM gateways use 78% CPU utilization, the highest CPU utilization machine. On the opposite side, these machines are using very little. What this is telling you is add CPU cores to this one. Maybe you'll remove a couple CPU cores from these guys because you're not using it. And you're having that same ability throughout this. You're looking at how your virtual machines are allocated memory and how they're actually using it. This VPN, for example, is assigned 4 gigs, but over the last month, it's only demanded 1.5 gigs. I've over allocated that machine. This type of information you might not get unless you did create some kind of custom report potentially in systems. We also have for dynamic memory, VM sprawl report. So this is how you're growing. It's very important to keep an eye on your VM growth. So this is showing me how many VMs we're adding month after month. These are virtual disks not attached to the VMs. Great place to find savings and storage. And CSV volume growth. I mean, this tells you very easily, this should typically probably match or come close to this. So as you're building VMs, you should obviously be growing in data also. So this spike here tells me we either added a really big virtual machine or something's going on. We're storing something on the CSV volume. Let's look at that big spike. Again, very easy to get this type of data now in that single pane. Some other reports that we offer here are a system status report. This is a complete inventory of all these items in your environment. So it completely breaks down everything in your environment, the state, for example, how much memory you're using, is it dynamic, static, CPU utilization, number of cores, number of virtual CPUs. And all this information can come out to you in a report that can be exported into PDF or maybe emailed to you once a week. Zombie VM reports. This is great. Basically what we're doing is we're ranking your virtual machines by least used to most used. What this gives you the ability to do is first look at your lowest used virtual machines, and most likely this virtual machine is a VM that someone may have forgot about. For the last month, it's been turned off because it has a rank of 0. So I probably want to delete this virtual machine or ask what's going on with it. And so the object here is trying to find some VMs that may have been forgotten about or not used any longer in your environment and get rid of them. And in the reverse, you can look at the VMs that are using up the most resources in your environment and try to find out what they're doing. So that's reporting. All these reports can come out to you by PDF, Excel, for example. And it gives you easy access to these reports. So as I said earlier, a lot of this stuff would be available. Either you would have to create a custom report in Ops Manager, or you would have to jump through different systems in order to do this, different UIs. So we bundled all the UIs together in this single view. And in Azure management piece, one other piece I wanted to point out here was the actual monitoring that happens here. So here we have alerts, and alerts you can either add a metric alert or an activity alert. So what this allows you to do is receive alerts, for example, if Azure VM goes over a certain amount of disk space or under. If Azure VM, for example, is accessed or logged in. So that's a log alert. A log alert would mean somebody logs into the VM, an action happens on that VM. A metric alert is something to the effect of a disk is now spinning at X IOPS, or the network is now pushing 10 megs a second. So you can set up all these different alerts. These alerts can come out to you by email. In some cases, you can even get text or cell phone calls. It all comes through the Azure OMS. And on the monitoring side, this is new for 4.0. So what we have in our previous versions, we had something called dynamic optimizations, and a lot of customers have been using this. If they have System Center already deployed, it has an optimizer very similar to this embedded within it, System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Our optimizer works very similar, where it's going to look at the virtual machines and look at the hosts and determine if they are using, determining the number of CPU cycles or memory that it's using, and then we'll create a failover event or move those virtual machines based on these parameters. And in testing of clients, they found that our dynamic optimizer actually would fire or is quicker to pick up these types of events than they found in System Center. So clients have been moving from System Center's dynamic optimization to ours just because it fires a little faster. And in those cases where this host is starting to hit a 99% CPU, you want to get those machines off as quick as possible. So we will handle that type of optimization of that. So that is a really quick overview of the current panel. Now I just want to jump into some forward-looking stuff here that we're doing, and then we can go into some questions or anything else that we might have. The first thing I'm going to show you here is our new web interface. So this web interface will be coming in the 4.0 interface. So now customers, this is what we're referring to as a tenant portal. So when you log into this, depending on which VMs you have access to, you'll see your VMs. And then you can perform basic actions on these. So you can start them as you see, pause, resume. And you can disable these functions too using RBAC. But the purpose of this is if you're an administrator and you need to give simple access to a virtual machine, you can do that through this interface and then disable some of these functions if necessary. And then users can access the consoles of these virtual machines remotely using Guacamole, and it's our remote console solution. So we're happy to bring this out. This is going to come out in the version 4.0, so customers will get this included with the build. And so this is a big exciting piece. It is fully multi-tenant. It's great for system centers or administrators, as I said, that need to give simple access to virtual machines. Whether it's just to turn off and on machines, or maybe it's just to connect to the consoles. And the last piece I want to show you is something that's kind of a little further out. I want to give you a sneak peek of it. It's going to be our new design of Fluent Design. And so what you look at here, and it gives you an idea of how our consoles work also, is I have a console here into my node, which I have deployed one of our Fluent Design builds. So this is also, this is not going to be in version 4.0. We're still working on this a bit, but I just wanted to give you a sneak peek since you're on the call today of this. So this is the Fluent Design of the console. As you can see, we have the same abilities as you saw in the original console, but it's going to be laid out in this different type of UI environment, kind of to match the way and the direction that a lot of software is going today with this Fluent type design, with the hamburger and the drop down and accessing the different features. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of this. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Vince. He'll go over some last details, and then we can go into any questions if anybody had on some of the things that we showed you today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. So we've got a couple questions that we should hit right away that were queued up here while you were going through the demo. So here's the first one. When seeing all the data that you collect, are there any limits? How many hosts/VMs does Cloud Manager support?
Cloud Manager itself can support an unlimited number of hosts. I mean, obviously there's limits to everything when it comes down to your network, your bandwidth, your disk space. But the way it's designed, it is designed to scale. So the underlying architecture is using PowerShell. And the way the agents work is the agents are actually sitting on your hypervisors. And what they're doing is they're actually just sending a small encrypted packet back to the management server using a messaging queue. And it was designed in this way to allow it to scale to hundreds of hosts or thousands of hosts, thousands of VMs. So yeah, you can definitely deploy it. We have some other options too. So some clients also deploy multiple management servers. So let's say you put 100 hosts on each management server. In that case, they do that in some cases because they want to separate this out into different sites. So if your company might have 3 different types of organizations, you can actually separate this out into 3 different deployments if you wanted to.
Okay, great. So hopefully that addresses that question. The next one is around REST API. So it says, I saw in the email references to REST APIs. Can you show your interface?
Yeah, so today I didn't actually jump into the REST API too much in order to spend more time on the actual application. So the REST API is available. I have to check to see if I have an example of it loaded right now, which I don't. But the REST API is going to give you access to all the functions that I showed you today. So whether you're creating a cluster or you're turning off and on virtual machines, or you want to collect metrics, all this is done through a simple REST API. And so the moment that you install our software, you're given access to this REST API. And then on top of that, with version 4.0, we're now including Azure ability in the API. So from your current environment, you'll be able to turn off and on virtual machines in Azure using the same API that you would use to turn off and on a machine on-premise.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
But unfortunately today I didn't have it loaded today for the sake of time.
Okay, this is a question that I'm not sure I know the answer to, but we can probably get back to this person. Can we rebrand the web console, meaning the tenant portal? I don't think that's going to be too difficult to do. I'm not sure that's in the current requirements. Do you know, Rob, offhand?
I don't know if it's in the current requirements, but as you said, that would be something very easy to do.
Yeah.
All we're doing with the web interface is interacting with our API. So, the same way that we're doing it, any client could also do it themselves. So, yeah, we'll have to check on that and get back to you.
Yeah, I think the assumption, though, should be, yes, you can rebrand it. It's probably some minimal work for us to do to add that in this release or the very next one. Does 5.9 require a routable network to manage? For example, I have a remote branch that has internet connectivity without VPN. Would I be able to manage the host remotely, perhaps via a gateway?
Yes, this is a great question, actually. This is one of the purposes of our software and the way it was designed. So what you would do is in the remote site, you have to make sure that port 5671 is available at minimum for outbound. So what you're going to do is you're going to install the agent in the remote Hyper-V host. And when the agent is installed, it starts talking outbound to our management server. So that's very easy to get out of the network. Now going back to the Hyper-V host, the only place where you need to make adjustments, and you're able to do this over the WAN without a VPN, is if you want to access a remote console. So let's say you actually wanted to access the console of either a Linux machine or a virtual machine. If you're doing that, then you have to deploy an RDG gateway, and our software actually has a very simple wizard to do this. So to answer your question, yes, and our software can make this happen, and it does it over the WAN without the need for a VPN.
Okay, great. Looks like that addressed that question. Here's another one. Do I need SCVMM at all after buying Cloud Manager?
No, I mean, if you see everything in our software that you're able to do in your day-to-day operations, then no. Our software does not require System Center. Our software does work side by side with System Center. So if you did have System Center deployed today, if you create a virtual machine in System Center, you'll see that virtual machine in our software, or vice versa. So yeah, if you can see all the functionality that you're getting from our software or some of the future updates we're doing, no, it does not require System Center, and you can remove it.
Yes, I think the broader answer maybe there is that it comes down to your use case and how you're using not only Virtual Machine Manager, but the other System Center components. If you're using them for features or use cases that 5.9 doesn't serve, then you might still have to utilize it, even though that might be on a rare occasion. But the goal is to make sure that you don't need the System Center suite as you leverage the Five9 platform more and more on a day-to-day basis. And I think the last question is around System Center 2019. Is the review you provided based on System Center 2019? I think that's the latest version.
Yes, and so basically, some of the things. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know every single nuance yet that is included inside of System Center 2019. But in general, like for example, I know that you can now, when you're creating a virtual disk, specify which CSV volume you place it on. Our software already works that way, for example. So when you create a disk, we always allowed you to select which CSV volume you place it on. I didn't really go item by item, for example, to identify. But yes, in general, the presentation today was built around the 2019.
Okay, and so we'll wrap up here with this slide. We've obviously talked to a lot of System Center users that are looking for a way to solve some of their challenges. And so what we did here is we listed out some of the challenges that we've heard, and these are just some of them that we've heard over the last, I'd say, year or 18 months or so. Obviously, the environment's very complicated to set up. I think that's well understood because of the disparate products and the kinds of licenses and third-party dependencies that are required. Performance, especially as you scale. Replication or sort of no native Hyper-V replication support, no local backup support, no historical monitoring data requires SCOM, capacity planning requires SCOM. So you're getting a sense, and you're probably well aware of this as a user maybe of System Center, that there's a lot of challenges that you have to deal with. And obviously the goal of Five9's products are to alleviate those challenges, provide operational and cost efficiencies, but also take it a step further, right? SDN management, Azure management, Azure security, migration, just a lot more capabilities than what you're seeing here on this SCVMM list. But hopefully this gives you a sense of some of the problems we help solve and how the platform scales within your infrastructure, both for today's needs and in the future. So with that, we'll wrap up for today. I want to thank everybody for joining, and we will be back in a couple of weeks with the next part of our demo series. So thanks, Rob, for a great demo, and we look forward to seeing everybody again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.